Study Section 2, Introduction to Web Programming. Web Programming. Introduction. In the previous study session, we examined the World Wide Web, how to evaluate a website, and also the web publishing process. In this study session, we will learn web programming languages used to design and develop a website, client and server side, scripting, as well as database technology. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain the concept of web programming, explain the term client-side scripting and server-side scripting, analyze client-side scripting and server-side scripting. Web programming. Web programming can be briefly categorized into client and server coding. The client side needs programming related to accessing data from users and providing information. It also needs to ensure there are enough plugins to enrich user experience in a graphic user interface, including security measures. 1. To improve user experience and related functionalities on the client side, JavaScript is usually used. It is an excellent client-side platform for designing and implementing web applications. 2. HTML5 and CSS3 support most of the client-side functionality provided by other application frameworks. The server side needs programming mostly related to data retrieval, security, and performance. Some of the tools used here include ASP, Lotus Notes, PHP, Java, and MySQL. There are certain tools, platforms that aid in both client and server-side programming. Some examples of these are Opera and Texas. Client-side versus server-side scripting. Web development is all about communication. In this case, communication between two parties over the HTTP protocol. The server, this party is responsible for serving pages. The client, this party requires pages from the server and displays them to the user. In most cases, the client is a web browser. The user uses the client in order to surf the web, fill in forms, watch videos online, etc. Each side's programming refers to code which runs at the specific machine, the servers or the clients. Server-side programming is writing code that runs on the server using languages supported by the server such as Java, PHP, C#. It is possible to write code that executes on the server side in JavaScript. Client-side programming is writing code that will run on the client and is done in languages that can be executed by the browser such as JavaScript. Basic example: 1. The user opens his web browser, the client. 2. The user browses to http://google.com. The client, on behalf of the user, sends a request to http://google.com, the server, for their home page. 4. The server then acknowledges the request and replies the client with some metadata called headers, followed by the page's source. 5. The client then receives the page's source and renders it into a human viewable website. 6. The user types Stack Overflow into the search bar and presses Enter. 7. The client submits that data to the server. 8. The server processes that data and replies with a page matching the search result. The client once again renders that page for the user to view. Client-side scripting. Client-side development is done almost exclusively in JavaScript. This is, of course, in addition to basic HTML and CSS code. The reason JavaScript is called a client-side language is because it runs script on your computer after you've loaded a web page. Client-side script can be used to enhance the functionality and user experience. For example, it can be used to provide simple mouse over image effects, animations, and form feed validations. Client-side environment. The client-side environment used to run scripts is usually a browser. The processing takes place on the end user's computer. The source code is transferred from the web server to the user's computer over the internet and run directly in the browser. The scripting language needs to be enabled on the client computer. Sometimes, if a user is conscious of security risk, they may switch the scripting facility off. When this is the case, a message usually pops up to alert the user when script is attempting to run. Uses: 1. Make interactive web pages. 2. Make stuff happen dynamically on the web page. 3. Interact with temporary storage and local storage, cookies, local storage. 4. Send requests to the server and retrieve data from it. 5. Provide a remote service for client-side applications such as software registration, content delivery, or remote multiplayer gaming. Example languages. Example languages: JavaScript primarily, HTML, CSS, Any language running on a client device that interacts with a remote service is a client-side language. HTML and CSS aren't really programming languages per se. They are markup syntax by which the client renders the page for the user. Server-side scripting. A server-side language runs its script before the HTML is loaded, not after. There are a range of server-side languages in use on the web today. PHP is one of the most popular, as well as Ruby on Rails, ASP.NET, and many others. They are called server-side languages because their scripts are run not on your computer but on the server which hosts the website and sends down the HTML code. Server-side scripts can also be used to enhance the functionality of a site. Some examples of features that can be included in a site by using server-side script include forums, polls, guest books, and searches. Server-side environment. The server-side environment that runs a scripting language is a web server. A user's request is fulfilled by running a script directly on the web server to generate dynamic HTML pages. A user's request is fulfilled by running a script directly on the web server to generate dynamic HTML pages. It is usually used to provide interactive websites that interface to databases or other data stores on the server. This is different from client-side scripting, where scripts are run by the viewing web browser, usually in JavaScript. Example languages: 1. PHP. 2. ASP.NET in C#, C++, or Visual Basic. 3. Nearly any language: C++, C#, Java. These were not designed specifically for the task but are now often used for application-level web services. Deployment and platform. In server-side programming, deployment has to happen from outside your code using some kind of tool, even if it is make, install, or a Git clone. And this deployment is usually manual, or at least it is expected to happen in a semi-supervised way. The system, meaning the OS on which you deploy, is usually uniform across a number of machines, but it can be heavily customized to your needs. In client-side programming, deployment happens from your server-side code, which serves the client automatically and without supervision. The underlying system, meaning mainly the browser, can be very different across a much larger number of machines. In order to make deployment feasible at all, standards have to be kept, and there is a much stronger trend to a single language environment. This is why copying server-side code from one machine to another can take weeks, while client-side code is usually trivial to execute in different machines. State and secondary effects. In server-side programming, state is a much bigger concern. meaning how to retrieve and update data at the request of the user with the possibility of conflict due to concurrency. Even if most of this complexity is offloaded to a database server, it is the server-side code's responsibility to allow the database to keep its guarantees on data integrity by using its interface correctly, e.g., not use a cache for updates that are never seen by the DB, while it is also a goal of the server-side code not to overload the database with work and keep the user waiting for response. In client-side programming, presenting the result to the user is a much bigger concern, and this implies secondary effects, mostly printing to the screen. This is not to say that there is no state involved, e.g. cookies, only that the main goal of the code is to actually interface with the user, and this cannot happen without secondary effects. This is why client-side programming usually requires, at some point, looking at the screen with a demo to check that all colors and layout are right, while server-side programming can happen almost exclusively in a text-oriented environment, where automated text check that the logic is still doing what it is supposed to do. Study section summary. In this study session, you learn that 1. The server, this party is responsible for serving pages. 2. The client, this party requests pages from the server and displays them to the user. In most cases, the client is a web browser. 3. Web programming can be briefly categorized into client and server coding. The client side needs programming related to accessing data from users and providing information. The server side needs programming mostly related to data retrieval, security, and performance. 4. Client-side development is done almost exclusively in JavaScript. 5. Example languages of client-side scripting: JavaScript, HTML, CSS, any language running on a client device. 6. Example languages of client-side scripting: PHP, ASP.NET, in C#, C++, or Visual Basic, and nearly any language: C++, C#, Java. This is the end of study section 2. Thanks for listening.